The neon sign of the roadside rest stop flickered in the twilight, casting an eerie glow across the nearly empty parking lot. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in the passenger seat, her heart pounding as she glanced at the man beside her. He wasn't the friendly trucker who had offered her a ride just hours ago. No, something had changed, and now fear gripped her with icy fingers. As they pulled into a parking spot, Sarah's mind raced. How could she get help without alerting her captor? The rest stop seemed deserted, save for a lone figure standing near the vending machines. She squinted, trying to make out any details that might give her hope. The driver's gruff voice cut through her thoughts. "Don't try anything stupid, girl. I'm just gonna grab some smokes. You stay put." He emphasized his point with a menacing glare before exiting the vehicle, leaving Sarah alone with her growing panic. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with her phone, praying for a signal. Nothing. The screen remained stubbornly dark, a black mirror reflecting her desperate face. Sarah's gaze darted around the cab of the truck, searching for anything she could use to defend herself or signal for help. That's when she remembered. Its SOS signal she'd learned about in a self-defense class. 3 short taps, 3 long taps, 3 short taps. It was a long shot, but it was all she had. Sarah began tapping on the window, her movements subtle but deliberate. Outside, the lone figure by the vending machine straightened up, his posture shifting from casual to alert. John Miller, a former Marine turned long-haul trucker, had stopped for a quick caffeine boost before hitting the road again, with something about the scene before him set off alarm bells in his mind. He watched as the man from the other truck strode towards the convenience store, noting the aggressive set of his shoulders and the way his eyes darted suspiciously around the lot. John's gaze shifted to the passenger window of the truck, where he caught a glimpse of movement. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap. 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 Pause. Tap, tap, tap. Recognition hit John like a thunderbolt. SOS. Someone in that truck needed help, and they needed it now. His military training kicked in, mind racing through possible scenarios and courses of action. He couldn't rush in blindly. That could put both him and the person in danger at risk. But he also couldn't stand by and do nothing. Inside the truck, Sarah's heart leaped as she saw the man by the vending machines react to her signal. He was looking directly at her now, his stance tense and purposeful. Could this really be happening? Had someone actually understood her plea for help? John's mind whirled as he assessed the situation. He needed to act fast, but smart. First things first, he had to confirm his suspicions and gather more information. Keeping his movements casual, he began to walk towards the truck, fishing his phone out of his pocket as if to make a call. As he drew closer, he could see the young woman more clearly. The fear in her eyes was unmistakable, and she was shaking her head slightly, warning him not to approach too closely. John gave an almost imperceptible nod, letting her know he understood. He veered away from the truck, positioning himself where he could keep an eye on both the vehicle and the convenience store entrance. His fingers flew over his phone's keypad, dialing 911 as he maintained his vigilant watch. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she realized what was happening. The stranger had understood her signal and was calling for help. For the first time since this nightmare began, a tiny spark of hope flickered in her chest. But they weren't out of danger yet. She could see her captor through the store's windows, impatiently waiting in line at the counter. Any moment now, he would return to the truck. What would happen then? Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. John spoke quietly but urgently into his phone, relaying the situation to the 911 dispatcher. "I'm at the Sunset Rest Stop on Highway 20, about 15 miles west of Cedar Rapids. I've got a young woman in distress, possible kidnapping situation. Suspect is a white male, mid-40s, currently inside the store. I need officers here ASAP." The dispatcher assured him that help was on the way, but John knew that every second counted. He had to find a way to stall the suspect, to keep him from leaving with Sarah before the police arrived. But how could he do that without escalating the situation or putting Sarah in more danger? As if in answer to his unspoken question, John noticed something on the ground near the suspect's truck, a small puddle of liquid, steadily growing larger. An idea began to form in his mind. It was risky, but it might just buy them the time they needed. Inside the truck, Sarah's heart leaped as she saw the man by the vending machines react to her signal. He was looking directly at her now, his stance tense and purposeful. Could this really be happening? Had someone actually understood her plea for help? John's mind whirled as he assessed the situation. He needed to act fast, but smart. First things first, he had to confirm his suspicions and gather more information. Keeping his movements casual, he began to walk towards the truck, fishing his phone out of his pocket as if to make a call. As he drew closer, he could see the young woman more clearly. The fear in her eyes was unmistakable, and she was shaking her head slightly, warning him not to approach too closely. John gave an almost imperceptible nod, letting her know he understood. He veered away from the truck, positioning himself where he could keep an eye on both the vehicle and the convenience store entrance. His fingers flew over his phone's keypad, dialing 911 as he maintained his vigilant watch. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she realized what was happening. The stranger had understood her signal and was calling for help. For the first time since this nightmare began, a tiny spark of hope flickered in her chest. But they weren't out of danger yet. She could see her captor through the store's windows, impatiently waiting in line at the counter. Any moment now, he would return to the truck. What would happen then? Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. John spoke quietly but urgently into his phone, relaying the situation to the 911 dispatcher. "I'm at the Sunset Rest Stop on Highway 20, about 15 miles west of Cedar Rapids. I got a young woman in distress, possible kidnapping situation. Suspect is a white male, mid-40s, currently inside the store. I need officers here ASAP." The dispatcher assured him that help was on the way, but John knew that every second counted. He had to find a way to stall the suspect, to keep him from leaving with Sarah before the police arrived. But how could he do that without escalating the situation or putting Sarah in more danger? As if in answer to his unspoken question, John noticed something on the ground near the suspect's truck. A small puddle of liquid, steadily growing larger. An idea began to form in his mind. It was risky, but it might just buy them the time they needed. Inside the truck, Sarah watched the drama unfolding before her with a mix of terror and desperate hope. She saw her would-be rescuer end his phone call and begin to move with purpose towards the front of the vehicle. What was he planning? The convenience store's bell jingled as the door swung open. Sarah's captor emerged, a plastic bag in one hand and a scowl on his face. He began to stride towards the truck, his eyes fixed on Sarah with a look that made her blood run cold. But before he could reach the driver's side door, the stranger who had been Sarah's silent ally stepped into his path. "Excuse me, sir," John called out, his voice steady and authoritative. "I hate to bother you, but I think you've got a problem with your truck. Looks like you're leaking fuel pretty badly." The man's scowl deepened as he glared at John, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "What the hell are you talking about?" he growled, taking a menacing step forward. John held his ground, gesturing towards the growing puddle beneath the truck. "See for yourself, that's definitely gasoline, and it's coming from your vehicle. You try to drive off like that, you could be looking at a real dangerous situation." Sarah watched the exchange with bated breath, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone must be able to hear it. She could see the internal struggle playing out on her captor's face, the desire to flee warring with the fear of drawing unwanted attention or risking an accident. As the two men moved to inspect the supposed leak, Sarah's mind raced. Should she try to escape now? But where would she go? She had no idea where she was, and her captor could easily overtake her. No, she realized with a sinking feeling, her best chance was to stay put and trust that help was truly on the way. In the distance, the faint wail of sirens began to cut through the evening air. John felt a surge of relief, but he knew the next few moments would be critical. The suspect's head snapped up at the sound, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "You set me up?" he snarled, reaching into his jacket. John tensed, ready to react, acutely aware that the situation could explode into violence at any second. Sarah pressed her hands against the truck's window, torn between the urge to cower in fear and the desperate need to know what was happening. The sirens were getting louder now, undeniably heading their way. Was this nightmare finally about to end, or was it about to get so much worse? As red and blue lights began to flash on the horizon, illuminating the darkening rest stop, the air crackled with tension. Sarah held her breath. John stood his ground, and her captor's hand remained hidden in his jacket. The next few moments would determine all their fates, and no one could predict how this confrontation would end. Inside the truck, Sarah's heart leaped as she saw the man by the vending machines react to her signal. He was looking directly at her now, his stance tense and purposeful. Could this really be happening? Had someone actually understood her plea for help? John's mind whirled as he assessed the situation. He needed to act fast, but smart. First things first, he had to confirm his suspicions and gather more information. Keeping his movements casual, he began to walk towards the truck, fishing his phone out of his pocket as if to make a call. As he drew closer, he could see the young woman more clearly. The fear in her eyes was unmistakable, and she was shaking her head slightly, warning him not to approach too closely. John gave an almost imperceptible nod, letting her know he understood. He veered away from the truck, positioning himself where he could keep an eye on both the vehicle and the convenience store entrance. His fingers flew over his phone's keypad, dialing 911 as he maintained his vigilant watch. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she realized what was happening. The stranger had understood her signal and was calling for help. For the first time since this nightmare began, a tiny spark of hope flickered in her chest, but they weren't out of danger yet. She could see her captor through the store's windows, impatiently waiting in line at the counter. Any moment now, he would return to the truck. What would happen then? Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. John spoke quietly but urgently into his phone, relaying the situation to the 911 dispatcher. "I'm at the Sunset Rest Stop on Highway 20, about 15 miles west of Cedar Rapids. I've got a young woman in distress, possible kidnapping situation. Suspect is a white male, mid-40s, currently inside the store. I need officers here ASAP." The dispatcher assured him that help was on the way, but John knew that every second counted. He had to find a way to stall the suspect, to keep him from leaving with Sarah before the police arrived. But how could he do that without escalating the situation or putting Sarah in more danger? As if in answer to his unspoken question, John noticed something on the ground near the suspect's truck, a small puddle of liquid, steadily growing larger. An idea began to form in his mind. It was risky, but it might just buy them the time they needed. Inside the truck, Sarah watched the drama unfolding before her with a mix of terror and desperate hope. She saw her would-be rescuer end his phone call and begin to move with purpose towards the front of the vehicle. What was he planning? The convenience store's bell jingled as the door swung open. Sarah's captor emerged, a plastic bag in one hand and a scowl on his face. He began to stride towards the truck, his eyes fixed on Sarah with a look that made her blood run cold. But before he could reach the driver's side door, the stranger who had been Sarah's silent ally stepped into his path. "Excuse me, sir," John called out, his voice steady and authoritative. "I hate to bother you, but I think you've got a problem with your truck. Looks like you're leaking fuel pretty badly." The man's scowl deepened as he glared at John, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "What the hell are you talking about?" he growled, taking a menacing step forward. John held his ground, gesturing towards the growing puddle beneath the truck. "See for yourself. That's definitely gasoline, and it's coming from your vehicle. You try to drive off like that, you could be looking at a real dangerous situation." Sarah watched the exchange with bated breath, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone must be able to hear it. She could see the internal struggle playing out on her captor's face, the desire to flee warring with the fear of drawing unwanted attention or risking an accident. As the two men moved to inspect the supposed leak, Sarah's mind raced. Should she try to escape now? But where would she go? She had no idea where she was, and her captor could easily overtake her. No, she realized with a sinking feeling, her best chance was to stay put and trust that help was truly on the way. In the distance, the faint wail of sirens began to cut through the evening air. John felt a surge of relief, but he knew the next few moments would be critical. The suspect's head snapped up at the sound, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "You set me up?" he snarled, reaching into his jacket. John tensed, ready to react, acutely aware that the situation could explode into violence at any second. Sarah pressed her hands against the truck's window, torn between the urge to cower in fear and the desperate need to know what was happening. The sirens were getting louder now, undeniably heading their way. Was this nightmare finally about to end? Or was it about to get so much worse? The tension at the rest stop stretched like a rubber band ready to snap. John's mind raced. years of military training kicking in as he assessed the volatile situation. The suspect's hand remained hidden in his jacket, but John couldn't risk making any sudden moves. Not with Sarah still trapped in the truck, her wide eyes visible through the window. "Look, buddy," John said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "Nobody's setting anyone up here. I'm just trying to help out a fellow driver. That fuel leak could be dangerous for everyone." He gestured towards the puddle, hoping to redirect the man's focus. The suspect's eyes darted between John, the approaching police lights, and Sarah in the truck. Indecision wore on his face as the wail of sirens grew louder. "I don't know what game you're playing," he growled, "but I'm not sticking around to find out." He lunged for the driver's side door, yanking it open. Sarah let out a muffled scream, scrambling to the far side of the cab. John's heart pounded as he realized he had mere seconds to act before the man could speed away with Sarah. "Stop!" John shouted, moving to block the door. "You can't drive off like this. It's not safe." The suspect whirled to face him, and John caught a glimpse of metal in his hand. A knife. The man's eyes were wild now, cornered and desperate. "Get out of my way," he snarled, brandishing the blade. John raised his hands, taking a step back. His mind raced, trying to find a way to defuse the situation without anyone getting hurt. "Easy now," he said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Let's all just take a breath here. No one needs to get hurt." Inside the truck, Sarah's heart thundered in her chest. She could see the knife glinting in her captor's hand, could practically feel the waves of panic and rage radiating off him. Her eyes darted to the passenger door. Could she make a run for it? But where would she go? As if reading her thoughts, the suspect lunged back into the truck, grabbing Sarah's arm with bruising force. "Don't even think about it," he hissed. Sarah whimpered, shrinking away from him as far as the confines of the cab would allow. John tensed, ready to spring into action, but the knife made any direct intervention too risky. He had to keep the man talking, buy more time for the police to arrive. "Hey," he called out, drawing the suspect's attention back to him. "Why don't you tell me what's going on here? Maybe I can help." The man barked out a harsh laugh. "Help? You want to help? Then get these damn cops off my back and let me leave." "I can't do that," John said, shaking his head. "But I can listen. What's got you in such a hurry? Where are you trying to go?" For a moment, something flickered in the suspect's eyes, a hint of the desperation and fear lurking beneath the anger. But then his face hardened again. "Nowhere that concerns you," he spat. The first police car screeched into the rest stop, lights flashing and siren blaring. The suspect's head snapped around, panic clear on his face. "No, no, no," he muttered, his grip on Sarah's arm tightening. "Last chance," he growled at John. "Get these cops to back off, or things are gonna get real ugly real fast." John's mind raced, trying to find a way to de-escalate the situation. You could see more police cars approaching in the distance. Time was running out. Okay, he said, holding up his hands. "I'll talk to them, but you got to calm down. No one here wants anyone to get hurt, right?" The suspect's eyes narrowed, suspicion warring with desperation. "Fine," he spat, "but make it quick." John nodded, turning slowly towards the approaching officers. He raised his hands, signaling them to stop. The lead car slowed, coming to a halt about 50 yards away. An officer emerged, hand on his holstered weapon. "Sir," the officer called out. "What's the situation here?" John took a deep breath, acutely aware of the knife-wielding man behind him and Sarah's terrified face in the truck window. "We've got a delicate situation here, officer," he replied, keeping his voice steady. "I need you to stay back for now. Let me try to talk this out." The officer frowned, clearly uncertain. "Sir, if there's a threat." "Please," John interrupted. "Just give me a few minutes. I think I can handle this." The officer hesitated, then nodded slowly. "All right, but we're right here if you need us." John turned back to the suspect, whose eyes were darting between John and the police cars. "See?" John said. "They're staying back. Now, why don't you tell me what's really going on here?" For a long moment, the only sound was the idling of engines and Sarah's muffled sobs from inside the truck. Then, slowly, the suspect began to speak. "It wasn't supposed to go down like this," he muttered, his voice low and strained. I just needed to get away, Start over somewhere new. But then this girl. He glanced at Sarah, something like regret flashing across his face. She saw something she shouldn't have. I panicked. John nodded slowly, encouraging the man to continue. What did she see? He asked gently. The suspect shook his head. Doesn't matter now. Nothing matters now. It's all falling apart. It doesn't have to, John said, taking a cautious step closer. Whatever happened, whatever you did, it's not too late to make it right. But first, you need to let Sarah go. At the sound of her name, Sarah's head snapped up. How did this stranger know who she was? The suspect's grip on the knife tightened. I can't, he said, his voice cracking. If I let her go, it's over for me. Prison, or worse. And if you don't, it'll be even worse, John countered. You haven't hurt her yet. That counts for something. But if you try to run now, with her as a hostage, that's a whole different ballgame. The man's eyes darted around like a cornered animal searching for escape. John could practically see the wheels turning in his head, weighing options, looking for a way out. Listen, John continued, his voice low and urgent. I don't know what you've done. I don't know what led you to this moment. But I do know that right now, you've got a choice. You can end this peacefully, or you can make it so much worse. For yourself, for Sarah, for everyone. Sarah held her breath, hardly daring to hope. She could feel her captor's grip loosening slightly, could sense his resolve wavering. How? The man finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. How do I end this? John took another careful step forward. First, you let Sarah go. Then you put down the knife. After that, we'll figure it out together. I promise. I'll make sure you're treated fairly. For what felt like an eternity, no one moved. The rest stop was eerily quiet, the distant hum of highway traffic the only sound breaking the tense silence. Then, slowly, the suspect's hand fell away from Sarah's arm. Go, he muttered, not meeting her eyes. Sarah didn't need to be told twice. She scrambled out of the truck, stumbling in her haste to put distance between herself and her captor. John caught her as she nearly fell, steadying her with gentle hands. You're safe now, he murmured, guiding her towards the waiting police officers. It's over. But as Sarah reached the safety of the police line, she turned back. The suspect still stood by the truck, knife in hand, John facing him with arms outstretched. It's your turn now, John was saying. Put down the knife. Let's end this the right way. The suspect's hand trembled, the knife glinting in the harsh glare of police floodlights. Would he take this final step, or would desperation drive him to one last fatal mistake? As the standoff continued, Sarah huddled in the back of a police cruiser, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She watched through the window, her heart in her throat, as the drama that had appended her life continued to unfold. The night was far from over, and the full story of how she had ended up in this nightmare was yet to be revealed. But for now, in this moment of fragile hope, Sarah allowed herself to believe that the worst might truly be behind her. The standoff at the rest stop seemed frozen in time. John stood perfectly still, his hands raised in a placating gesture as he faced the suspect. The man's grip on the knife wavered, his eyes darting between John and the line of police cars beyond. Come on, man, John said softly. You've made it this far, don't throw it all away now. A bead of sweat trickled down the suspect's forehead. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, indecision etched across his face. In the police cruiser, Sarah leaned forward, her breath fogging the window as she watched. A female officer sat beside her, gently trying to coax information from her, but Sarah couldn't tear her eyes away from the scene outside. Miss, the officer said, can you tell me your full name? And how you ended up in that truck? Sarah swallowed hard, her throat dry. Sarah Mitchell, she managed. I was hitchhiking, trying to get to my aunt's place in Cedar Rapids. He seemed nice at first, offered me a ride. Her voice trailed off, the memories of how quickly things had gone wrong still too raw. The officer nodded sympathetically, jotting notes in a small pad. And when did you realize something was wrong? Sarah's mind flashed back to the moment everything changed, the friendly conversation turning dark, the sudden detour off the main highway, the growing sense of dread in her stomach. You got a phone call, she said slowly. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but after that, he just changed. Started asking me all these questions about what I'd seen, what I knew. Before the officer could ask another question, a commotion outside drew their attention. The suspect had taken a step back, bumping into the truck. The knife clattered to the ground. "That's it," John said, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "You're doing the right thing. Just stay calm." Two officers approached cautiously, while John stepped back, giving them room to work. As they secured the suspect, John's shoulders sagged, the tension of the past hour finally catching up to him. An older officer approached John, notepad in hand. "Sir, I'm going to need a full statement from you. Can you tell me how you first became aware of the situation?" As John began recounting the events, Sarah watched him from the cruiser. Who was this man who had risked so much to help a stranger? And how had he known her name? In another police car, the suspect sat in sullen silence. Detective Mark Rodriguez studied him through the rearview mirror, trying to piece together the puzzle. This was no simple case of attempted kidnapping. The suspect's panic, his cryptic words about Sarah seeing something she shouldn't have. It all pointed to something bigger. "So," Rodriguez said casually, "want to tell me what this is really all about?" The suspect's eyes flicked up to meet his in the mirror, then quickly looked away. "I want a lawyer," he muttered. Rodriguez nodded. "That's your right. But let me tell you something, whatever you're mixed up in, whatever you're trying to protect by keeping quiet, it's not worth it. We got the girl, we got you, and it's only a matter of time before we get the whole story. You might want to think about getting out ahead of this." A muscle twitched in the suspect's jaw, but he remained silent. Back at the rest stop, more police cars and a couple of news vans were pulling in. John finished giving his statement and walked over to the cruiser where Sarah sat. He knocked gently on the window. Sarah rolled it down, looking up at him with a mix of gratitude and curiosity. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. But how did you know my name?" John's expression shifted, a flicker of something, guilt? Worry? Crossing his face. "It's complicated," he said. "But I promise, I'll explain everything. Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" Sarah shook her head. "No, I'm okay, just scared and confused. What's going on? Why did he take me?" Before John could answer, a commotion near the suspect's truck caught their attention. Several officers were clustered around the vehicle, one of them holding up a small object. "Detective," the officer called out. "You're gonna want to see this." Rodriguez jogged over, taking the object, a cell phone, from the officer. He scrolled through it, his eyebrows rising. Well, he muttered. "Looks like our friend here has some interesting contacts." He walked back to the cruiser holding the suspect. "Want to tell me about these messages?" he asked, holding up the phone. "Seems like you were expecting some kind of delivery tonight. Care to fill in the details?" The suspect's face paled, but he pressed his lips together, refusing to speak. Rodriguez sighed. "All right, have it your way, but just so you know, we'll be tracking down every number in this phone. Whatever you're involved in, it's all going to come out." As he walked away, Rodriguez's mind was racing. This case was quickly ballooning beyond a simple kidnapping. The cryptic messages, the panic over what Sarah might have seen, it all pointed to a larger operation. But what? He approached John and Sarah, his expression grave. "I think we're going to need to move this conversation somewhere more private," he said. "Miss Mitchell, I'm going to need you to come down to the station to give a full statement. And you, sir," he turned to John, "I have a feeling there's more to your involvement than you've let on. I'd appreciate it if you come in as well." John nodded slowly. "Of course, detective, whatever you need." As they prepared to leave the rest stop, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this nightmare was far from over. She'd escaped one danger, only to find herself caught up in something much bigger and potentially more dangerous. The news vans were setting up, reporters already beginning their live broadcasts. "Breaking news tonight," one was saying. "A dramatic rescue at a local rest stop may have uncovered links to a larger criminal operation." Sarah sank back into the seat of the police cruiser, her mind whirling. What had she stumbled into? And more importantly, how was she going to get out of it? As the convoy of police cars pulled out of the rest stop, lights flashing, Sarah caught one last glimpse of the suspect being loaded into a transport van. His eyes met hers for a brief moment, and the look in them sent a chill down her spine. This, she realized with growing dread, was only the beginning. The fluorescent lights of the police station buzzed overhead as Sarah sat in the small interview room, her hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup of lukewarm coffee. Detective Rodriguez sat across from her, his kind eyes belying the intensity of his questioning. "So, Sarah," he said, leaning forward, "I need you to think carefully. Was there anything unusual you noticed during your ride? Any stops, phone calls, or conversations that seemed off?" Sarah closed her eyes, trying to push through the fog of fear and exhaustion. There was a stop," she said slowly. "About an hour before the rest stop. We pulled over near an old barn. He got out, said he needed to stretch his legs, but he was gone for a while." Rodriguez's pen scratched across his notepad. "Did you see anyone else there, or hear anything?" Sarah shook her head, then paused. "Wait, I think I heard another vehicle. A truck, maybe? It sounded like it was idling nearby." In the next room, John paced back and forth, running his hands through his hair. Officer Chen watched him, her expression a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Mr. Miller," she said, "you still haven't explained how you knew Sarah's name, or why you happened to be at that exact rest stop at that exact time." John stopped pacing, his shoulders sagging. "It's complicated," he said for what felt like the 100th time. I wasn't just a random bystander, but I can't say more without putting people in danger." Jen's eyes narrowed. "What people, Mr. Miller? Who are you protecting?" Before John could answer, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Rodriguez burst into the room, his face flushed with excitement. "We got a hit on one of the numbers from the suspect's phone," he said breathlessly. "It's linked to a warehouse on the outskirts of town. We're mobilizing a team now." John's head snapped up, his eyes wide. "You can't go in there blind," he said urgently. "It's not what you think. It's bigger than." He cut himself off, but it was too late. Both Rodriguez and Chen were staring at him intently. "Mr. Miller," Rodriguez said slowly, "I think it's time you told us exactly what you know." Across town, in a dimly lit warehouse, a group of men huddled around a burner phone. The tension in the air was palpable. "He's not answering." One man growled, slamming the phone down. "Something's gone wrong." Another man, older and clearly in charge, paced the concrete floor. "We need to move," he said. "Now, pack everything up. We're abandoning this location." As the men scrambled to action, the leader pulled out his own phone, dialing a number from memory. "We've got a problem," he said when the call connected. "The shipment's been compromised. We need to activate the contingency plan." Back at the police station, Sarah had been moved to a small break room. She sat on a worn couch, staring blankly at a muted TV playing the local news. The story of her rescue was still making headlines, but now there were hints of a larger investigation unfolding. A soft knock at the door made her jump. John entered, his face drawn and tired. "Hey," he said softly, sitting down beside her. "How are you holding up?" Sarah managed a weak smile. "Been better." "John, what's really going on here? Please, I need to know." John sighed, running a hand over his face. "Sarah, I'm not who you think I am. I'm not just some random good Samaritan. I'm—" Before he could finish, Rodriguez burst into the room. "We've got to move, now," he said urgently. "We think they're clearing out the warehouse. If we don't get there soon, we'll lose everything." John stood up, his expression hardening. "I'm coming with you." Rodriguez looked like he wanted to argue, but something in John's tone made him nod. "Fine, but you stay in the car, understood?" As they rushed out, Sarah found herself being ushered along with them. "It's not safe to leave you here alone," Chen explained as they hurried to the parking lot. Minutes later, a convoy of unmarked police cars sped through the night, sirens silent but lights flashing. Sarah sat in the back seat of one, sandwiched between John and Officer Chen. The tension in the car was thick enough to cut with a knife. As they neared the warehouse district, Rodriguez's voice crackled over the radio. "All units, approach with caution. We don't know what we're walking into here." John leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "Detective, listen to me. You can't just storm in there. These aren't ordinary criminals. They're—" His words were cut off by a deafening explosion. The night sky lit up as a fireball erupted from one of the warehouses ahead. "Oh my God," Sarah gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Rodriguez's voice came over the radio again, tight with tension. All units, hold position. Do not approach. I repeat, do not approach. As the cars screeched to a halt, John was already opening his door. Stay here, he said to Sarah, his voice leaving no room for argument. John, wait. Sarah called, but he was already sprinting towards the burning warehouse, Rodriguez close on his heels. Sarah watched in horror as the two men disappeared into the smoke and chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance as fire trucks raced to the scene. But even as the area swarmed with emergency responders, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was just beginning. In the flickering light of the fire, she caught glimpses of shadowy figures moving in the darkness, slipping away from the scene. And as she strained to see through the smoke, a terrifying thought struck her. What if the explosion wasn't an accident? What if it was a cover-up? The night air was thick with smoke and unanswered questions. As Sarah watched the inferno rage, she realized that the truth she'd stumbled into was far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. And somewhere in that chaos were John and Detective Rodriguez, racing against time to uncover a secret that someone was willing to burn everything to keep hidden. The acrid smoke burned Sarah's eyes as she strained to see through the chaos. Firefighters rushed past, their shouts muffled by the roar of the flames. She felt helpless, trapped in the police car while John and Detective Rodriguez had vanished into the inferno. Suddenly, a hand grabbed her arm. Sarah jerked away, her heart pounding, only to find Officer Chen looking at her with urgency. We need to move, Chen said, her voice tight. It's not safe here. As they hurried away from the burning warehouse, a series of smaller explosions rocked the night. Sarah stumbled, steadied by Chen's firm grip. They reached a secondary command post where other officers were huddled around radios and laptops. Any word from Rodriguez? Chen asked a harried-looking sergeant. He shook his head grimly. Nothing. We've lost contact with him, and that civilian, Miller, was it? Sarah's stomach churned with worry. What had John gotten himself into? And why did he seem to know so much about what was happening? A commotion near one of the police vans caught her attention. Two officers were struggling with someone, the suspect from the rest stop. How had he gotten here? Let me go, the man was shouting. You don't understand. They'll kill me if I talk. Sarah edged closer, straining to hear. The suspect's eyes locked onto her, whitening in recognition. You, he called out. Girl, listen to me. It's not what you think. Your friend, the one who rescued you. He's not who you think he is. Before Sarah could process his words, a deafening boom shook the ground. Everyone ducked instinctively as debris rained down. When Sarah looked up, her blood ran cold. The police van was engulfed in flames, the suspect nowhere to be seen. Officer down! Officer down! The frantic shouts cut through the chaos. Sarah watched in horror as paramedics rushed to a prone figure on the ground, Officer Chen. In the confusion, Sarah found herself alone, forgotten in the scramble to help the injured and contain the fire. Her mind raced. What had the suspect meant about John, and how had he known about their connection? A movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. A figure was slipping away from the scene, moving with purpose through the shadows. With a jolt, Sarah recognized the stride. It was John. Without thinking, she followed him, her heart pounding. John moved swiftly, seeming to know exactly where he was going. He led her away from the warehouses, down a series of increasingly deserted alleys. Finally, he stopped in a dimly lit courtyard, enclosed by high brick walls. Sarah hesitated at the entrance, suddenly unsure. John stood with his back to her, his posture tense. I know you're there, Sarah, he said without turning around. You shouldn't have followed me. Sarah stepped into the courtyard, her voice shaking slightly. Who are you, John, really? He turned to face her, his expression unreadable in the shadows. I'm not the hero you think I am, Sarah. I'm sorry, but I can't let you leave here now. You've seen too much. A chill ran down Sarah's spine as she realized the gravity of her mistake. She took a step back, but found her exit blocked. 3 men had appeared behind her, their faces grim and purposeful. I'm truly sorry about this, John said, his voice heavy with regret. But you've stumbled into something much bigger than you can imagine. We can't risk you talking to the police. Sarah's mind raced, searching for a way out. The police already know everything, she bluffed. Detective Rodriguez. John's bitter laugh cut her off. Rodriguez? He's been on our payroll for years. Why do you think he was so eager to raid that warehouse? We needed to destroy the evidence. The truth hit Sarah like a physical blow. The rescue, the investigation, it had all been elaborately staged. But why? What were they hiding that was worth all this? As the men closed in around her, Sarah's survival instincts kicked in. She tensed, ready to fight or run, though she knew her chances were slim. But before anyone could make a move, a new voice rang out in the courtyard. Federal agents, freeze. Bright lights flooded the area as figures in tactical gear swarmed in from every direction. John and his men raised their hands, clearly caught off guard. A woman in a dark suit approached Sarah, her badge glinting in the harsh light. "Sarah Mitchell, I'm Special Agent Hawkins, FBI. You're safe now." Sarah's head spun as she tried to process this new development. "I don't understand," she stammered. "What's happening?" Hawkins's expression was grim. "You've accidentally uncovered a massive human trafficking operation, Sarah. We've been working to bring it down for months. Your kidnapping and rescue inadvertently provided us with the breakthrough we needed." As John was led away in handcuffs, he locked eyes with Sarah one last time. There was something in his gaze, regret, fear, that made her shiver. Agent Hawkins placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "I know you must have 1,000 questions, but right now, we need to get you to a safe location. This isn't over yet." As they left the courtyard, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was still missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. The night's events replayed in her mind, each revelation leading to more questions. Who was John really working for? How deep did this conspiracy go? And most importantly, was it truly over, or was this just the beginning of an even greater danger? As the FBI SUV pulled away, sirens still wailing in the distance, Sarah realized that her ordinary life had been shattered forever. She was now a key witness in a case that went far beyond a simple kidnapping. And somewhere out there, powerful people would stop at nothing to keep their secrets hidden. The city lights blurred as they sped through the night, heading towards an uncertain future. Sarah Mitchell, once just a girl trying to visit her aunt, now found herself at the center of a storm that threatened to engulf everything in its path. And as the adrenaline of the night began to fade, one thought echoed in her mind. This was far from over. The safe house was a nondescript suburban home, its normalcy a stark contrast to the turmoil of the past few days. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee growing cold between her hands as she listened to Agent Hawkins brief her team. "We got John and his immediate associates in custody, but the head of the operation is still at large," Hawkins said, her voice tense. "We believe they're planning one last major move before going to ground." Sarah's mind wandered back to the cryptic conversation she'd overheard, the pieces slowly falling into place. "The shipment," she said suddenly, causing the agents to turn to her. They kept talking about a shipment that was compromised. Hawkins nodded, her eyes sharp. "We think that shipment is a group of trafficked individuals. If we can intercept it, we can not only save those people but also potentially catch the mastermind behind all this." As the agents discussed strategies, a commotion outside drew their attention. Sarah peered through the window to see a familiar face being escorted up the driveway, Detective Rodriguez in handcuffs. Hawkins stepped out to meet the arriving agents. "Good work bringing him in," she said. "Let's see if he's ready to talk." Hours passed as Rodriguez was interrogated. Sarah paced the living room, feeling helpless and on edge. Finally, Hawkins emerged, her expression grim but determined. "Rodriguez cracked," she announced. "The final shipment is coming in tonight at the old industrial port. We're mobilizing now." Sarah stood up. "I want to come," she said firmly. Hawkins shook her head. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous, and you're a key witness." "Please," Sarah insisted. "I've been a part of this from the beginning. I need to see it through." After a long moment, Hawkins nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but you stay in the command vehicle, no matter what." "Understood?" The industrial port was a maze of shipping containers and abandoned warehouses. Sarah sat in the back of a high-tech surveillance van, watching screens that showed agents taking up positions around the area. The tension was palpable as they waited for any sign of activity. Suddenly, one of the technicians called out, "Movement at the east entrance." multiple vehicles approaching. Sarah leaned forward, her heart racing as she watched a convoy of trucks roll into view. As they came to a stop, figures began to emerge, armed guards escorting a group of terrified-looking people. "That's them," Hawkins said into her radio. "Move in now." The next few minutes were chaos. Shouts and gunfire erupted as FBI agents swarmed the area. Sarah watched the screens intently, her fists clenched as the operation unfolded. Then something caught her eye, a figure slipping away from the main group, heading towards a small boat docked nearby. With a jolt, Sarah recognized him as the leader she'd glimpsed at the warehouse. Without thinking, she grabbed a radio. "Agent Hawkins, the leader. He's getting away on a boat at the south dock." "Damn it," Hawkins's voice crackled back. "All units near the south dock, converge now." Sarah watched anxiously as agents raced to intercept, but they were too far away. The boat was already pulling away from the dock. In that moment, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She slipped out of the van and ran towards a small motorboat she'd spotted earlier. Her heart pounded as she fired up the engine, adrenaline overriding her fear. "Sarah, what are you doing?" Hawkins's panicked voice came through the radio. "Stand down immediately." But Sarah was already speeding across the water, gaining on the escaping boat. She could see the leader now, his face a mask of fury as he realized he was being pursued. Suddenly, he veered sharply, heading towards a narrow channel between two large ships. Sarah followed, the boats weaving dangerously through the tight space. As they emerged on the other side, Sarah saw her chance. She gunned the engine, pulling alongside the leader's boat. Without hesitating, she leaped, tackling him just as Hawkins and her team arrived at another vessel. In the struggle, something fell from the leader's jacket, a flash drive. Sarah grabbed it as agents swarmed the boat, securing the mastermind behind the trafficking ring. Later, as things calmed down and the rescued victims were being tended to, Hawkins approached Sarah. "That was incredibly reckless," she said sternly, then softened. "And incredibly brave. You may have just helped us bring down an entire international network." Sarah handed over the flash drive, her hands shaking slightly as the adrenaline wore off. "I just couldn't let him get away," she said. "Not after everything that's happened." As forensic techs began analyzing the drive, an agent called out in excitement. "Chief, you're going to want to see this. It's not just trafficking. We got evidence of high-level political corruption, offshore accounts, everything." Hawkins turned to Sarah, her expression a mix of awe and concern. "You've just stumbled into something much bigger than any of us realized. Your life may never be the same after this." As the implications sank in, Sarah watched the sun rising over the water, casting a golden glow across the port. She thought about the innocent people she'd helped save, the criminals brought to justice, and the wider conspiracy now exposed. Her ordinary life had been shattered, yes, but in its place, she found a strength and purpose she never knew she had. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Sarah Mitchell was ready to face them. As they headed back to shore, Hawkins received a call. Her face paled as she listened. Then she turned to Sarah. "There's something you need to know," she said gravely. "It's about your aunt in Cedar Rapids, the one you were going to visit." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, sensing that this journey was far from over. The story of the girl at the rest stop had been just the beginning. A new chapter was about to unfold, one that would test Sarah in ways she never imagined.